We have a brand new text, 118-page bill, and it would protect the federal government from a deadline shutdown tonight, and a vote could happen literally within the next hour. And the clock is ticking. I mean, as of now, we are less than 7 hours away before that government shutdown would take place. So joining me now to discuss the latest developments is Lindsey McPherson. She is the Capitol Hill reporter for the Washington Times. Lindsey, welcome to Washington Watch. Long time no see. Good to see you again.
Hi. Good to see you again, too.
Okay, so Lindsey, tell us, what's the latest? What is going on right now?
So as you mentioned, that bill has just been released probably in the last half hour. We finally have the text. They have a plan to vote on it within the next hour, as you have said. And the big question is whether they can get Democratic support. They've decided to bring this bill forward under a process that, as you know, suspension of the rules, which requires 2/3 support of the House rather than a simple majority. That means Democratic votes will be needed if they're going to successfully pass it. Democrats, having just got the text along with everyone else, are trying to come through and decide what they're going to do. It is largely identical to a bill that was brought to the floor yesterday and failed. And that was all Democrats and 38 Republicans, all but 2 Democrats, I should say, and 38 Republicans voted against. But the major difference is that it strips out a 2-year extension of the debt limit that President-elect Donald Trump had demanded. So largely, other than that, the bill is mostly identical. There is at least one change we noticed that would drop an extension of child and family services programs. There's a brief section to extend some of those programs through the duration of the CR of March 14th. That section was dropped, not clear why, not sure if that'll bother Democrats. So everything's evolving, but basically this vote set for sometime in the next hour, and we'll find out soon enough whether they have enough votes to pass it. House Democrats are currently huddling as we speak to kind of decide what they're going to do. And as their votes are needed, that is kind of the crucial junction at this point. And if it gets through the House, it'll probably get through the Senate, and then we'll get to a conclusion here sometime in the next 24 hours or so, depending how quickly the Senate can come together and speed up their own process.
Okay, so last night we had 38 Republicans vote against it. 2 Democrats voted for it. The rest of the Democrats voted against it. And yet this is going to need 2/3 votes because it's a suspension bill. So if virtually all Democrats voted against it last night, along with 38 Republicans, are the changes sufficient, you think, to bring the Democrats on board? That raises serious questions to me as to whether or not that would make a difference.
Potentially. The Democrats had 2 issues. One, they were really upset that the original bipartisan deal they negotiated, which included a ton of other measures that are not in this version or yesterday's version, were dropped. They had a bipartisan agreement among the so-called 4 corners, which are the top 4 congressional leaders in Congress. And they are upset that that was scuttled effectively. President-elect Donald Trump didn't like it. He said it gave away too many things to Democrats. And he also started to demand an increase in the debt limit to be added. So that was added to yesterday's version and then dropped. So I think that the dropping of the debt limit will help Democrats to some degree, in that they did not want to deal with that now. They are worried about approving a debt limit hike before Republicans take up an extension of the tax cuts that they were will add a lot to the deficit and other things. So that could help, but we don't know yet. They're just getting this bill and meeting now on it. So we'll find out soon enough whether they will back this or not.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting, because one of the big question marks I had about this was what would be the reaction of the Democrats on the debt ceiling issue. But you believe that taking that out of the equation right now will actually help the Democrats come on board. Is that right?
I believe it will, just because they did not want to deal with that now before Republicans come into office and pass through reconciliation. They're planning a lot of things, to tax cuts and spending cuts and different things that will impact the deficit. And the debt limit, while it officially January 1st will be unsuspended, it's been suspended since June 2023. It doesn't actually, the statutory borrowing limit's not going to hit. Treasury has extraordinary measures that they can use to kind of continue paying down debt obligations. So it's not really an issue until sometime, experts estimate, in June, when Treasury runs out of that wiggle room. The Congress has time to deal with this. The Democrats didn't want to deal with it now. Republicans also kind of had some concerns about dealing with it now without spending cuts, and that's why they agreed to drop it for now. And they did have a tentative agreement that coming out of the Republican conference where they discussed that they will deal with the debt limit next year as part of these reconciliation bills where they're dealing with the other things, spending cuts and tax reform.
So what are you expecting on the Republican side? I would think there probably are some that are going to struggle with this because the lack of pay-fors with the disaster relief and the farm bill. Do you still think there may be 38 opposing it, or do you think that number will go down on the Republican side?
I think it could go down a little, but there definitely are a good, at least more than a dozen, I would say, fiscal conservatives who wanted the disaster relief to be paid for and probably will still oppose this. There are also a handful of Republicans who always oppose CRs, don't like CRs.
Right.
So, but I do think it will be slightly lower than 38. I think the debt limit without the spending reforms was a big issue for a lot of Republicans as well, and that's why that number was as high as it was. But you were colleagues with these people, so you might have better insight.
I don't know if I have better insight or not. I mean, it's a lot of moving parts right now. But let me ask you this. Now, I think this is important for our viewers and our listeners to kind of have a perspective on this. Obviously, considering tomorrow is Saturday, how bad would it be if the government does have a shutdown after midnight tonight, but a deal is worked out before Monday, let's just say? What would...
it would have...
Yeah,
it would have very minimal impact if they get this passed before Monday, or even if they're on track. So if it passes the House and the Senate is just jumping through procedural hoops, the Office of Management Budget doesn't typically initiate their full shutdown procedures. In that case, they know that it's just a matter of mechanics and getting it passed, particularly over the weekend when most government workers aren't working. It's not like they have to show up to work anyways, so it doesn't matter too much. And all the people that typically work in the weekends in the government, most of those people are essential and would continue to go to work, TSA agents, border agents, all that stuff.
Okay, I think that's good for people to kind of understand this. All right, so let me just push a little bit further, Lindsey, if I can, on this. So what would be the most likely scenarios if the vote tonight fails? What would happen?
Well, the Republicans did have an alternative plan that they were debating, which they could try to do, which is basically to split these pieces up. And they were going to do 3 separate bills. This was an offer that they discussed during their conference meeting today, to have a separate bill that has the funding extension through March 14th, a separate bill that has the disaster aid, and a separate bill that has the economic aid to farmers. And then to vote those all separately under a rule that might combine them when they send them to the Senate, but then they would have separate votes. So I guess that would be potentially the next plan, to go back to that. But that does have some issues where the disaster aid will still need Democrats' support, for example, because like we talked about, the conservatives here who don't like that that's not offset.
So what are your expectations? I mean, here the vote's virtually going to be starting here any moment. What do you anticipate in your heart?
I think in my heart that given the closeness to the funding deadline, that Democrats will accept this and, live to fight another day on the other stuff that they were upset that got excluded. But I don't want to say 100% certainty, because this past couple days have been pretty wild.
Yes, they have. Lindsey McPherson, thank you so much. Reporter with Capitol Hill reporter with the Washington Times. Thank you so much. Good to see you again. Hope you have a wonderful Merry Christmas.
Thanks, you too. Merry Christmas.